Hello everyone, my name is Frederik Debrabander, and in our series of Energy Transition for Resilience, I'm here today with my colleague Roel Mondt, who is the director in our Tax and Legal Services department. And we're gonna talk here today about what can companies actually do in this current energy crisis from a tax and legal perspective. So Roel, what do you see happening and what are companies doing? What is happening in Europe?
Yes, so on the energy crisis, clearly Europe is trying to accommodate for companies, and we already see of the 27 member states, 15 are already applying certain measures, mostly tax-related. Now, EU does not prefer that they do a lot of the VAT cuts. They prefer excise cuts, but Spain, Greece and Poland are doing VAT cuts. And for example, in Poland, it's not a small cut. It's a 23% to 8% cut of the VAT on energy products. So that's clearly something to try to accommodate for that energy crisis. Out of those other countries that are, so those 15 in total, most of them are doing the excise cuts. Excise is preferred by EU because it's a lot more focused on specific products and specific topics. So clearly that is what EU prefers. So that is very concrete, trying to match with those difficulties on the market. Now, for companies that is not super convenient because they just have to sit and wait mostly, and they can apply it, and especially if they're multinational, they have to take into account the different possibilities and different schemes that are being rolled out. On a more strategic note, it's interesting to see that there are also different routes. So you see Italy has decided to postpone the shutdown of the coal-fired power plants by 13 years, which is also pretty significant. On the other hand, and maybe that is more the way EU would like them to move, that is what France, Croatia and Spain are doing, is really to invest on electrification and decarbonization. So it's a different approach, but clearly to really tackle that energy crisis for companies.
And then there's also all of the European regulations and things like the Industrial Accelerator Act, Clean Industrial State Aid Framework. I mean, what is happening on that side and what can companies do to actually tap into those funding schemes and support schemes?
Yeah, indeed. So there already has been for a long time several funding schemes and so on, but now specifically to support industries and industrial competitiveness. And so at first, maybe we should go back. We start off with the Draghi report. Clearly there were many issues, but the most prominent ones were slow permitting and the lack of financing and funding. Now, the Draghi report actually then worked into the Clean Industrial Deal, which is more of a vision. And the Clean Industrial Deal needed to have tools. And the tools was indeed the IAA, as you mentioned, Industrial Accelerator Act, but also the CISAF, so the Clean Industrial Deal State Aid Framework. It's quite a mouthful, actually. And those two tools, they're very much tailored to accommodate for those difficulties of European industry. And although in the past it was always about sustainability, decarbonization already, it's still there, but clearly state aid has been released a lot and has been expanded quite nicely. And although the mechanism might sound or look a bit complicated, there are already some quite nice examples. So I think one of the most prominent ones was the first one, summer 25 already in France. 11 billion in state aid was approved by the Commission in France, in particular for offshore wind. And not for a specific company, but it's really on that value chain. The value chain was being supported by France. And so that is the CISAF part of it, so the financing part of it. Now the IAA, so how can we speed up the permitting, is also implemented into that French scheme because the transmission line, the permitting for that, could not exceed 12 months. So clearly you see Europe is trying to make sure that there is the right framework with already a few examples. So the French one is a nice one. In Belgium, we see that there is a new tax incentive, a thematic investment deduction that is clearly inspired also by that CISAF. Again, what you see is that carbon capture is included now, recycling to ensure raw materials, These are now within the scope of a very interesting tax incentive. Also, the benefit has been increased. And then maybe a very nice final example is what Spain, I think last month, March 26, could release 200 million for the EV production capacity in Spain. So clearly that is also targeting that decarbonization, electrification market, but again, value chain driven. And then a final thing, which is also nice to understand, is that some people might remember that Northvolt already 23-24 could have moved into a US environment because of the Inflation Reduction Act. It was a very interesting scheme in the US. And at that point, Europe decided that Germany could match that grant scheme. Now, at that point, it was a bit of more of an emergency call. Now, in the CISAF, that is also being implemented. So that's nice that grant matching is now also an opportunity to make sure that, especially European companies, do not go outside of Europe to get their investments and their plans set up. So also that is nice. And coming back to your question of, okay, how does a company actually request then or benefit from this? Clearly, the framework is being set. Europe has made that possible. Now it's about value chains, sector organizations, talking to countries and member states so that they can really tap into those state aid mechanisms that are very well now tuned for their needs.
So what you're saying is a lot exists now, but there's a lot of work on the table over the next 12 to 18 months with companies and sector organizations to make sure that they can actually get this moving and tap into those schemes, right?
Yes, indeed, absolutely.
Okay, and that's probably what we need to do to accelerate the transition that is currently ongoing and due to the energy crisis unfolding. So with that, Roel, thanks for being here, and stay tuned for our next update on the energy transition for resilience. Bye-bye.